All right, we are here at the base of my VermiHut, and right below this is the basin. So this would catch any kind of liquid, but the way I run my VermiHut, we don't ever get liquid down here. And this right here is a board that is supposed to prevent worms from going down. It does a fairly good job. The problem is if they get down, it's a little bit harder for them to get up. So I run my VermiHut by putting dry shredded cardboard in the first couple of trays. And here's what the trays look like with about 1,600 holes that make up the bottom. So let's go ahead and put our first tray in. So whether you're starting your VermiHut brand new or if you've had it for a while, the first tray that I put on when I rotate or I start a brand new VermiHut is to put a tray full of dry shredded cardboard. This is just shredded cardboard that I make in my 12-sheet crosscut micro shredder. It does an absolutely fantastic job of obliterating the cardboard that I put through there. So if you do have a brand new VermiHut, go ahead and save that block of cocoa coir for another tray that we're going to put on here. So for the rotation, we've got our new dry shredded cardboard tray or the new inoculating tray. And on top of this, we are going to put a tray that has been sitting in the stack for over 60 days. So this tray is now the oldest inoculating tray. So now we have two trays on top of the VermiHut. And if you're just starting your VermiHut, this is just another dry shredded cardboard tray you've put on top. And if you're doing a rotation, this tray has actually been on here for 60 days for you, and it's going to feel just a little bit damp. We might find a worm or two in here, but depending on how wet your feedings are, this might not have any worms or too much moisture in it at all. Now, this was kind of protecting that bottom basin from getting messy or dirty with any kind of liquid, and I am seeing right here a little bit of mold mycelium coming through, and that's because it's just a little bit damp on the edges. For some reason, the edges tend to be a little bit damp around the sides, and that is possibly because of condensation hitting and kind of dripping down. What I'm doing here is I'm just kind of mixing it up to see if there's any kind of worms or moisture and to kind of fluff it up because it gets a little bit matted down, which is completely fine. So let me continue to fluff it up, and then we'll come right back to put our next tray on top. So as I'm going through here, I do feel that it is just slightly damp, so it is getting a little bit inoculated. There are some microbes in here, which is good. Now, if you are just starting your VermiHut, that's what you want. You want the layers underneath your top tray that you're going to feed to start to get a little damp and get inoculated with microbes so that as you do your rotations like we're doing here, it gives it kind of a jump start when you start putting food in and the worms come up into the tray. So we've got it all flattened out, and now we are ready for our next tray. And this tray right here is the new pre-harvest tray. Now for those of us that are rotating, this was previously the top feeding tray, and now it is the pre-harvest tray. So the worms are going to eat all the food that is up here over the next 60 days, any of the scraps that are left. And for those of you that are just starting out your VermiHut, this is the third tray that you're going to put on top, and it is the one you're going to feed. And this is the one that you're going to put that block of cocoa coir after you've hydrated it in here to be the layer of food and bedding that they're going to eat. So let's go ahead and dig inside because we did feed it last time. And the last time we were in here, as I'm seeing the worms kind of run away, is first we laid down a paper towel down the center. Then we added some apple cores and apple pieces, a lettuce stalk, and strawberries from our garden. Then we put down a tomato top and various small fruits and vegetable parts. Next, we laid down some banana peels and topped it off with a whole bunch of coffee grounds and eggshell grit. And finally, we buried everything up and topped it with some more coffee grounds. And that might be why we see so many worms on the top there, because I'm really not seeing the coffee ground. You can tell the difference between them and the castings once you have had your worm bins for a while. But let's kind of go down here and see if there's any whole food scraps that we have in here. I'm just going to kind of dig under and see what this is right here. That right there looks like coffee grounds. We did put a whole bunch in, so I am seeing it kind of dried and matted down, and we'll just just kind of break that up just like that. Now I do see a lot of these cardboard shreds, and that's because we put a bunch in a little while ago before we thought we were going to rotate. But I'm actually rotating a little bit later than I normally do because we had an issue with tofu and an issue with protein powder. And as I pull through here, we're seeing lots of great worms in and out. So this is good. Over the next 60 days, the worms are going to eat all of this shredded cardboard, and we are going to be able to harvest this, and it's going to be fantastic. Yeah, I can see the worms all over this tray, and especially down here in the bottom, and that's because of the coffee that we put everywhere, but also because they ate all the food scraps, I think, that we put down the center. So they're just kind of going all throughout it and trying to get to everything that is left. And that right there is a banana stem. This is going to take a little bit longer. In fact, I'm going to put it in our new feeding tray. Now I'm starting to smell a little bit of citrus, so we must have fed some of that in one of our earlier feedings. And here's another top of a banana stem that I'm going to put in that other tray that's coming up. And yeah, check it out. Lots of beautiful worms right there. This particular bin has a mix of both red wigglers and blue worms. Blue worms are more of a tropical worm, and I am here in Florida, so they work well for our climate. In fact, pretty much anywhere in the United States, they'll work well in an indoor bin, and that's what this is right here. So let's kind of go towards the top and see if we see the same thing that we saw kind of towards the side facing you, and see if there's a lot of worms in here as well. Yep, sure enough, lots of good worms too. So now I'm just gonna kind of fluff this up and mix it up because we want the worms to continue eating out of this tray even though we're not gonna feed it anymore. We are just gonna let it sit down here and let the worms eat the rest of the coffee grounds that are in here and all of the paper cardboard shreds. Another banana stem. All right, so now this VermiHut has 3 trays on it, and if you are just starting, this is the end of the road for you. This is the tray that you would put up here and start feeding. But for those of us that are rotating, this is the pre-harvest tray, and we are not going to see this particular tray for another 60 days because we're going to let the worms eat all this stuff down, and then we will harvest it. So let's put our next tray on here, which is our new top feeding tray. So for those of us that are rotating, we now have our top feeding tray. And this used to be the oldest inoculating tray. So you can see some of the castings that kind of came through those holes. And we will probably see just a few worms in here if we see any at all. And this is pretty damp, and it is, oh, there's a worm right there. And it is full of microbes, and we haven't even fed it at all. So we are kind of getting a jump start by storing our shredded cardboard in here in the trays that sit below our feeding trays while we are running our VermiHut. Now the one I have here comes with 5 trays. I always keep one off and I use that to sift my other worm bin, and I fill the other 4 and have them on the stack. So things are looking good, and I'm just going to lift from the bottom and kind of pull up, and now we are going to go ahead and make a little trough in order to feed this. Now if you are just starting your VermiHut, you do not want to feed very much. Maybe a little piece of lettuce and maybe 3 or 4 strawberry tops. And it doesn't matter if you have 500 worms or 1,000 worms or 2,000 worms when you start off. You want to put a very small feeding in so that you can see, are the worms kind of adapting to their new home and are they eating the food? And then after that, you can add a little bit more and more. So we've got our trough here, and I'm gonna feed them just like I do any other feeding. So first we go in with some dry shredded cardboard, and here you can tell the color difference, and that's because this is bone dry and this is a little damp. So I like to freeze all my food, and if this was my very first feeding in any worm bin, right here is all I would feed it. A little bit of lettuce and 2 strawberry tops. 7 days later, I would come in and see how much of it they ate and then give them a little bit more. But this is a very mature bin that has somewhere around 4,000 to 5,000 worms in it, so we are going to give them a whole lot more. In fact, we're going to give them most of this, and this is a whole bunch of lettuce. Now lettuce is mostly water, and I think within here is a couple of our stalks that we grew in our garden, and also some carrot tops that we grew in our garden. So we're gonna put that in there just like that, and believe it or not, with the amount of worms we have, they're gonna come up from the tray below it, and they are gonna devour this probably within about 5 or 6 days. So we're gonna give them some blueberries just like that, and then they're gonna get some banana peels. I see a lot of people put banana peels straight into a brand new worm bin, and I would kind of advise against that, because although the worms will eat this part of the flesh right here, they take a long time to eat this part of the peel, and what can happen is the sugars within the banana and the banana peel can ferment. So hold off on giving it banana peels and bananas for maybe a month or so. And then we'll add another one right there. And then next we're gonna put in this cucumber that kind of went bad on us, and I'll break it into 2 pieces because it is a little hard to break, and because we want to get this shredded cardboard even more wet, we're putting in really damp food and really fast food like this lettuce and this cucumber right here. All right, so next we're going to go in with some coffee grounds, and you're going to see me give them a lot. Again, this is a very mature bin. It is 4 years old, and I'm going to give them some of it through this shredded cardboard right here. It'll be interesting to see when we check in if they came up to here where it's not really all that moist compared to the feeding zone, and see if the worms came up and ate it. I have a feeling they will, because we put a lid on here, and when the water condenses, it hits that lid and drips right back down. Now for your first feeding, I wouldn't put any coffee grounds. You're just trying to see if they eat the food, and then you can start putting coffee grounds. Very little, not as much as I put in here, and you can also put this in, and this is pulverized eggshell grit, and what the worms do with it is they eat it up and they use it in their gizzard to make their food smaller and smaller, because they don't have teeth. Kind of like birds, they need something to help them digest their food. So now we're just going to kind of bury it up with some more shredded cardboard, just like that. I'm also trying to get the levels higher, because right now there is a lot of airspace between all this shredded cardboard and this food, and as the worms eat everything down, it gets smaller and smaller, and the volume gets smaller and smaller. So every time you're feeding, you're adding more and more bulk, and there we go, just like that. Now if this was a normal feeding, we'd be done. I'd put the lid on and we would come back in about 10 to 14 days, or if it's a brand new bin, about 7 days. But we have that other tray that has all our worm castings in it, and we need to get the worms out. So let's use the agitation technique to get them out. So this tray is the one that is coming off the stack and that we are going to harvest, and you can see it is chock full of worms. So in order to get the worms out, we could sift it, but what we're going to do is we are going to agitate it. Now I do find that my VermiHut worm castings are a little bit more moist than, say, my outdoor worm bin or even sometimes my urban worm bag, but with the agitation method they do actually get a little bit drier, and the worms will find that it is not very hospitable to stay in them, because 1, we are agitating them, but 2, we've got some strong lights overhead, and worms naturally do not like light, so they bury themselves out. So as you can see, here are the holes that the worms are going to climb down through. Each one of the trays has 1,600, and they are going to use those to go into the tray below, which is our top feeding tray that we just fed. So they are going to be pretty happy to get down there. So let me finish agitating, and then we will stop for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we will come back in and agitate again. We'll do that for about 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll wait again for another 5 to 7 minutes and keep doing that about 5 or 6 times until all the worms are out and all the castings are free of worms. So let's go ahead and finish agitating, and then we'll be back after I've gotten most of the castings out of here. So we're down to just the last little bit and the last few worms, and we must have been putting some peanut shells in before, so I picked those out, and I'm just gonna put the last of the worms and the remnants in here, and then we are gonna take this tray off, and I will probably rinse it over the garden to get any of the last bit of castings out of here, and maybe even tap it over our storage container to get the rest of the worms and castings out. And right here is the 7.5 pounds of castings that we got ready to use and go in my garden. So I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe. And if you want to see a different video on how I rotate and kind of on a side shot to make it maybe a little bit easier to understand, go ahead and check out this video right here. So now we're just going to pull this tray off, and you can see all the worms that went down, and we're going to reunite them with their buddies here and spread this out. So I hope you're having a great day. I hope your worm bins are doing fantastic, especially if you just rotated them. So happy vermicomposting, everybody. Take care now.